local. This is Fox 12 Now.
Hello everyone, I'm Greg Nibbler. This is Fox 12 Now. Thank you for joining us wherever you are. We do appreciate it. We start live streaming here every weekday starting at 1 p.m. Pacific. We're on Facebook, YouTube, our website, and our apps. And thanks for joining us. You can watch all of our segments on those platforms as well after they air. But we are live, and what we are talking about right now, well, is Measure 110. As you remember, November 2020, this was passed by Oregon voters, which effectively decriminalized small amounts of hard drugs, the possession of those drugs, instituting other things instead. Now there's House Bill 4002, or House Bill 4002, which was recently signed into effect by Governor Kotek, which essentially recriminalizes some of those small amounts and also sets up funds for other parts of the original bill to be enacted. Now, this is set to go in effect on September 1st, and we wanted to talk to some different people about different viewpoints on this particular bill and whether or not they think it's going to be effective or ineffective depending on their viewpoints. So this interview is actually with somebody from Oregon Recovers, which is a recovery organization for people who are recovering from addictions, and we spoke to Jesse Cornett about his opinions on this. So let's go straight to that right now here on Fox 12 Now. Jesse, thank you, for being here with us today and joining to talk about this. I think to start off, if you could give us all just an idea of what Oregon Recovers is as an organization and your role with that.
Sure. So I'm Jesse Cornett. I'm the Policy and Advocacy Director here at the organization. As an organization, we're statewide, comprised of individuals in recovery and their family, working to improve the system that we have for those seeking help around the state.
And, when you talk about that as far as those seeking help, can you give a little bit more of a description of what that means as far as those people in the community who may be seeking help from Oregon Recovers?
Yes, absolutely. There are actually two separate sides to the work that we do. One is really the policy and advocacy side, which is what I helm, where what we're doing is we're looking to the legislature and we're paying very close attention to all things, including, especially in this most recent session, House Bill 4002, and making sure that the voice of the recovery community is heard as policy decisions are being made. This is not a population that's been traditionally engaged in the political process. We also run the Recovery Network of Oregon. Recovery Network of Oregon is now an app that is the most comprehensive set of data on existing recovery resources available to those looking for help in the state. I like to highlight that anytime I speak because that's not something that truly existed. It's in infancy when I found my recovery, which was during COVID. I was somebody that was too stubborn to go the more traditional routes and had nowhere to turn to find the copious other help that's available in the community out there for folks looking for help with their recovery. So it's a tremendous resource.
And let's talk about those bills that you mentioned, Measure 110, that being passed, and we know everything that entails as far as decriminalizing the use of drugs. And for you, just to ask, were you a proponent of that measure, and if so, why?
No. I was very early in my recovery at the point, and those that I knew in the recovery world expressed concerns. Here were the concerns that they raised. What the ballot measure sought to do and what the ballot measure did was it decriminalized the possession of small amounts of drugs, and then it created a system to deal with the aftermath. But we've already taken away the criminal penalties, and we haven't given time for that system to be stood up, is the colloquial way that it's said. And so it was doomed from failure from the start. I don't personally or as an organization necessarily oppose the possession or the criminalization or decriminalization rather, but the method at which we chose to decriminalize in Oregon was wrong, and unfortunately time has shown that out. Unfortunately, what the legislature did in passing House Bill 4002 felt really just like a call and response, where they have recriminalized the possession of small amounts of drugs. And guess what we're going to do? We're going to try to build another entirely brand new system to deal with the aftermath of that and hope that it's ready in time.
So between the two of these, with Measure 110 having been in place, even though you don't agree with that system on how that was implemented, do you think we would have been better off for people who are seeking recovery, or even people who are having issues with drugs? Would we have been better off keeping that system as is and fixing that, or is it better to have House Bill 4002?
So the academic data that exists has shown that Oregon has a drug crisis, an addiction crisis. If you look at comparable cities, Boise, Sacramento, Seattle, our addiction rates aren't actually any worse because we chose to do the decriminalization path. And so whether we're better or worse, I don't think there's any way to make an apples for apples comparison there. But what I do know is that it would be disingenuous of me to not suggest that we would be in a much different position today had the money flow into the behavioral health network system not been created from Measure 110 and the subsequent legislative action. So there was far more, just like House Bill 4002, there was far more at play than simply decriminalizing or recriminalizing. And when you look beyond the base issue, there are peripheral benefits.
And just to go in and to clarify, what you're saying there as far as your opinion coming there from Oregon Recovers. So you feel that other side of it, regardless of the criminalization or decriminalization of drugs, that part was not given enough attention as far as the recovery side. Am I accurately saying that, or please correct if I'm wrong?
On 110 or on House Bill 4002?
Let's start with 110.
110, we created a system, and there are a lot of folks that have popped up around the state that are doing incredible work in the recovery space as a result of that.
And with House Bill 4002, that's changing that.
They're going to hold that harmless, fortunately. House Bill 4002, I think the concern that we had with that, so we did a survey of folks in recovery. It wasn't scientific while the legislature was in session, and asked a couple of questions about their support of recriminalizing to some measure. A majority of the folks that answered, a significant majority, would be open to some additional levels of criminalization. And we found that interesting. Actually, more interesting than that was that if you found your sobriety, you got into your recovery via the criminal justice system, you were more likely to be in support of adding new criminal penalties. Unfortunately, what the state decided to do with House Bill 4002 is create a system of opting in. So as of its passage, 23 out of 36 counties had opted in. And if you look at that, what you can say is the 13 counties, you can get treated very differently than you might get treated in Multnomah County, for instance, which did opt in. But you could take that one step further, because the municipalities aren't bound to follow this, even if the counties opted into creating this deflection system, which means that an officer could interface with two people dealing with the exact same issue in the exact same situation, and offer one of them treatment going into the deflection system, but decide to take the other one to jail. And what we believe is that is going to create a very inequitable system of enforcement across the state.
Do you believe that this is going to be manageable as it's been implemented?
So the meetings on implementation are just getting going. And one thing that I'm satisfied is that the governor, in signing the bill, really zeroed in on ensuring we get deflection right. So we're starting the implementation process now. Unfortunately, we have a very compressed timeline. This is supposed to be stood up and active on September 1st. That's when we can start issuing criminal citations again. I don't think that most jurisdictions will be able to get there in time, which means that there will be an overlapping period where deflection is not an option for you. And that is not okay. So the implementation, we're getting into that right now. And these are the decisions, and this is the timeline that, if not done right, will affect the entire future of this legislation.
And when it comes to Oregon Recovers, I guess, just to go into that just a little bit more, so with this, how will this change what you do on a day-to-day basis?
On a day-to-day basis, this actually doesn't change what we do. What we think this is going to do is, and when we're looking at this and we're talking about deflection and sobering centers, and the need for more detox beds, what this is going to do is it's going to provide an influx of cash to help better support that specific system, which means that on the app, we're going to have more places for people to go, which is going to be a good thing. And from an advocacy level, we're going to have a lot more folks that are going to get trained up and be active in the advocacy front to ensure that we're doing the best job that we can, taking care of the folks in need.
So I guess in that aspect, then that sounds like, as you just mentioned, that will be a good thing for the organization to provide that more. But if I'm understanding correctly, it's this implementation that's going to be the real issue.
It always is. Everyone, it's the public is want to follow the news media and reporting about the ups and the downs and the ins and the out, which bill passed. But the devil is in the details is one of the adages from the state capitol, and the details are getting unpacked in the coming weeks and the coming months. So there's a legislative process, then there's an administrative process, and you can't put too many sideboards on in the legislative process because that ties hands. And when you're beholden to a deadline and you have to pass something, you have to leave some details for the administrative side, and for the realities of what happens on the ground. And so what happens in the next 6, 8, 12, and 24 months is going to be very telling.
Would you prefer it if they extended that deadline from September 1st to something to provide more time to go through all of those details of administration and management?
I don't think that they actually needed to put an actual date on there. I think it would have been more reasonable to put a parameter in law where criminal citations cannot commence until this exists.
Gotcha, and that makes sense. Well, Jesse, thank you for joining us too to talk about your side of things. Is there anything else that you'd like to share as far as your opinion or from an organizational standpoint about House Bill 4002?
No, but there's another bill that I would like to talk about, which is a companion bill, House Bill 5204, excuse me. Due to the oddness of the legislative process, the legislature also passed a companion bill with the funding. It passed $221 million for deflection and treatment services. The governor's big housing bill had $19 million in it just for recovery housing. The reality is that when you get out of a sobering center, you don't necessarily have anywhere to go, so you go back to the streets and to your same habits. That can replicate itself after detox, after treatment. And we're creating somewhere to go through all the steps of the process because of the funding provided in House Bill 5204. I don't know why I'm struggling to say that today. The passage of that bill will have an innumerable positive impact on the state of Oregon and those in needs.
I think
we got it right.
So I'm sorry, I interrupted you there, but it sounds like you just said that's a good thing. This bill is the right step to provide.
5204, yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
House Bill 4002 did some really good things. There were some folks that wanted to go with the concept of repeal, which would have took down the Behavioral Health Resource Network, which would have had a destructive effect on our states. There were components of the bill, for instance, right now, when you get locked up, you lose access to your health insurance. You no longer have access to opioid use disorder medications such as Suboxone. In fact, I was just reading a book about an NBA player who was in jail, and they laughed at him when he asked for his wallet because he had his Suboxone there as he was starting to go into this withdrawal. And that is something that happens day in and day out in jails in Oregon, worse and worse because of the toxic substances that are on our streets. And this piece of legislation ensured that the state is going to pay for that medication. So getting locked up isn't a barrier to you being healthy. And so there were good components of this bill, to be sure.
All right. Well, Jesse, thank you very much for joining us to share your side of this and Oregon Recovers in general. And I appreciate you being here on Fox 12 Now.
Yeah. Hey, thanks so much for having me. Thanks for the coverage and have a great rest of the day.
All right, so there we go, and we appreciate all of you who do join us. I say that a lot, but I do mean that. So again, that was Jesse from Oregon Recovers. We have some other viewpoints and perspectives as well at kptv.com, and we'll continue to bring those here on Fox 12 Now. Also, so if you have something that you think would make for a good segment, feel free to send me an email, fox12now@kptv.com. I'll be happy to get that on here or take a look and see if we can make that as a segment. So again, that email is fox12now@kptv.com. Don't forget to download the Fox 12 Oregon app as well. It's a great way to catch up on all of the segments here and also everything else that we have going here at Fox 12 Oregon. That's it for right now. I'm Greg Nibbler. This is Fox 12 Now.